Fauci, oh Fauci. Which Fauci is it today? This is Steve Elliott with today's Grassfire Counter-Drudge report on the coronavirus crisis. The stories you're probably not going to hear, certainly the perspective you're not going to hear in the national media or from Matt Drudge. Let's get right to Dr. Fauci, who was doing his circuit on the media yesterday, and he was on CNN and on MSNBC, and in both interviews seems to be indicating that if he'd had his way, we could have stopped this in January or February. He knew better, and he was advising the president that we could have shut down society. At least that's how they're spinning it. This is the same guy who in February said there's no reason to change anything about your lifestyle at this point, who also in February encouraged people, go ahead, go on cruises, no problem, who in late March was publishing in the New England Journal of Medicine that in reality this is going to be about the same mortality rate as the common flu. Now, the president retweeted a tweet that mentioned Fire Fauci, so we'll see what fireworks happen today. So how about all the lockdowns? Now, the lockdowns is what's creating really the crisis in our country economically. We have a crisis of 15 million unemployed. We've got a serious issues with the breakdown of the food supply might be coming, as Smithfield Foods is announcing that they're closing one of their plants, and they're concerned about that. It's the lockdowns. Look at what this study said. The mean daily case growth had already been declining at this point, at the point that the lockdown started. There was no additional decline in mean daily case growth after implementation of statewide restrictions or internal movement. The lockdowns. In other words, the case growth was declining probably from the social distancing before the lockdowns went into place. And this decline rate didn't change. Now, of course, the people who did the study had to disclaim, they're not saying that they didn't work, because if they even admitted that the lockdowns perhaps didn't work, they might get, who knows, banned from the internet or cast to the COVID dark web or something. So they didn't want to admit that. But here's the reality. Let me try to put it in perspective. What's your risk of dying of COVID-19? If you're under 65, this is a 200-mile drive from near my home, Norfolk, Virginia, to Washington, D.C. It's about 200 miles. It's only 3 hours because there's no traffic, because nobody's on the highway. But I want you to think of a 400-mile round trip, 200 miles out, 200 miles back, someplace you could drive today. What's your risk of dying on that trip in the car? There's a risk, right? There's some risk of that, but you take that trip. I know I will drive to D.C. today if I needed to without thinking of the risk of death, although there is a risk of death. Well, one study shows that that's about the same risk that you have of dying of COVID-19 if you're under 65. It's about the same as a 400-mile drive round trip. Now, one of the reasons is so many percentage of the people are older with comorbidities. Look at this. I couldn't believe this out of Iowa. 48% of COVID deaths in Iowa have been in nursing home, have been of nursing home residents. This is definitely not a pandemic of the general population. This means if you're in Iowa, you have almost no chance of dying from this disease, a very small chance if you're not living in a nursing home. So let's protect the people in the nursing homes. Let's protect the elderly. Let's protect those with comorbidities and let the rest of us move around our country. Look at my state of Virginia. We're locked down for 3 months. Now, as of this morning, it was as of yesterday, the total deaths in Virginia was 149. Now, what we're calling for is these antibody studies, which will determine how many people have already had COVID-19 and now have these antibodies in their blood. Look at this. If just 1% of Virginians have already been infected, then the mortality rate in Virginia is 0.17%. If 2% have been already infected, then we're down to 0.08%. If just 3% have been infected, 0.06%. Now, those numbers are all about what or below what the common flu is. Now, what are the chances that Virginia's at 1% of Virginians? It's actually pretty good, because the only true antibody study in America was in a rural town in Colorado, and they found that somewhere between 0.9% and 3% had already been infected. And there's towns in Germany where there's a deep antibody study where 14% had already been infected. So there's a decent chance that at least 1% of Virginians have already been infected, and then the mortality rate plummets to about the same as the seasonal flu. How about our COVID-19 84? Lots of updates today on Grassfire, links to all this. Fauci is also saying that he can't guarantee that we'll be able to vote in person in November. He wants immunity certificates. Kentucky police did record license plates of Easter church service goers who are going to a drive-in church. Michigan bans driving between two homes that you own. DC shoppers have to wear face masks, and they've banned tennis and golf. In Massachusetts, there's a $100 fine for walking in the wrong direction. And in Mississippi, Christians were fined $500 for attending drive-in church. And here's what I want to highlight. Google and Apple are working together on an app. Sounds good. They're working together on an app to track this spread of COVID. Here's what one reporter said. If someone you had coffee with 2 days ago tests positive for coronavirus, you would get a notification along the lines of, you may have recently been exposed. Well, it's going to go live, and it's going to be live. So that if someone who has COVID-19 goes out in public, the phones are going to be beeping all over. Bad enough walking to Walmart now. Imagine walking to Walmart and getting people looking at their phones because someone just COVID-19. I'm not sure, dude, but I might want to know about convicted sexual offenders. Maybe my phone should beep if I'm near a convicted, or if someone gets near my house. But this is going to be crazy. Maybe this is the world you want to live in. I'm not sure it's the world I want to live in. Talking about 18 months of lockdowns. This is never going to end. We won't be able to vote in November. We're going to have apps on our phone that track everybody on this stuff. People are using the stay home everywhere. They're putting it in their Facebook posts. Maybe it's time we put something different on our Facebook posts. How about act normal? It's going to take great courage for us to go out and act normal. Now, the numbers support it. The fatality rates are plummeting everywhere we do deep tests. Maybe it's time that we need to step out and act normal before we lose our country. Okay, again, this is Steve Elliott with Grassfire. All the links to all these stories are on grassfire.com. Thanks so much for watching, and act normal.